This Fed has been late. You know, I was on the show a couple of years ago screaming and yelling about the Fed being too late to hike, then too late to cut. I stopped long ago listening to what Jay Powell says about what he's going to do, because he's been wrong every time.
Investor Stephen Auth earlier today telling it like it is, making clear how he feels about Fed Chair Jerome Powell's abilities. But are Powell's mistakes enough to get him fired? Joining me now is Antoni, Heritage Foundation economist and Unleash Prosperity Hotline senior fellow, and David Bahnsen, managing partner at the Bahnsen Group. Wonderful to see you two guys. Thanks very much for coming in. David, what do you make of all this?
Well, it's a big mixed bag, because I'm so critical of a lot of what the chairman has done, and I'm basically critical of the job that we ask him to do. A lot of the stuff that I hear from my conservative friends criticizing Jay Powell are not a criticism of Jay Powell. They're a criticism of this overly ambitious vision of a Fed. Everybody turns to the Fed. They deify the role. Blaming Powell for all the inflation is just as ridiculous as vindicating him for bad decisions. The president does not have a legal right to fire him, and the president has every right to be disapproving of certain things he's done. But what I find so ironic is Powell's doing exactly what the president wants him to do. He just didn't say it 2 days ago. If anybody thinks he's not cutting 3, 4, 5 more times this year, they're crazy. He is doing it. The futures market's telling you he's going to do it. And President Trump's going to get exactly what he wants from Jay Powell.
Well, EJ, on the whole issue of the politicalization of Mr. Powell and doing things that really we haven't seen. We saw it around the edges with other Fed chiefs, but not to the extent where he went after a particular policy and said this was a mistake, was going to make his job more difficult. For example, you never heard him talk about the money that was being spent by the Biden administration, hand over foot, which, you know, was responsible for the inflation that we all suffered through.
Exactly. And when he was asked about that, when he was asked to comment on it, he essentially said no comment. He said, we're the Fed. We don't respond to questions about fiscal policy, right? We don't make the spending decisions. We just take what happens as a given and then we deal with it. But we don't comment on it over and over again. He was even asked about specific pieces of legislation under Biden, these big spending bills. And every time he said, no comment, we're not going to deal with that. That's not our business as the Fed. Now, all of a sudden, he feels free to comment on all of these things. He's even commenting on tariff policy when the tariffs aren't set yet. We don't know what that policy is ultimately going to look like.
David, it sounded like you were going towards the question of whether we need the Fed and whether we need it to do everything that it is doing. I agree we need a lender of last resort. Yes. If there's a financial crisis, you should have a lender of last resort in a country. But for all of the other things that it's doing, isn't it doing too much?
Yes, but Congress has asked it to do some silly things. And the pop culture, what I learned from COVID, different than the financial crisis, most of the country didn't know what the Fed was. And then after Bernanke, Paulson, GFC stuff, the Fed took on a much larger role it never had before. And then during COVID, there was just no question. Everybody was wondering, what is the Fed going to do today? They create this alphabet soup of agencies and different groups. I would like a much more humble Fed. I happen to disagree with some of my fellow Austrian friends. I think we need a central bank, but only as a lender of last resort. But that's not what the Fed's there to do now. But you know what, David? It's irrelevant. We're not getting to my view of the Fed anytime soon. So in the meantime, what can we do? Have them operate with rules. Have a rules-based framework that limits what they can do. I'm a little concerned that a lot of people are critical of Jay Powell not being political before by wishing he wouldn't be political now. I don't want him to become political at all. The tariff question's tricky because it wasn't a specific piece of legislation. They asked him if this was complicating his job. He said yes. I agree with EJ. He should have said the same thing on Biden legislation. I don't think it was politically driven. He was appointed by President Trump. Let's not forget that. But they're in a tricky position here because the tariff issue does affect what they do.
Well, EJ, there are other times that the Fed has become political in using economics as an excuse. For example, the Phillips curve, suggesting that if you have a roaring economy, that's inevitably going to lead to more inflation, which is we are going to have to address in some way. That's not at all true. We saw it in the Reagan administration when we had this extraordinary. We had a 7% growth rate one of those years of the Reagan administration, I think 84, 85, and yet inflation kept coming down. So it's just nonsense. A lot of the stuff they believe that their decisions are based on.
Exactly. And I think this is another reason why Trump has such a beef with Powell. If we think back to his first term, as growth was accelerating and inflation was actually staying low, in fact, it came down for several quarters, Powell's response was, we better hike rates, otherwise this growth is going to set off another round of inflation. And Trump threw a fit about that, and rightly so, because growth does not cause inflation. That's nonsensical.
But when he raised rates then, they were at 0%. He raised them from 0 to 1, 1.5. And I think they were trying to give themselves wiggle room. But I'm with you that the main criticism I have is not a specific rate call, either to do it or not do it. It's the philosophy of Phillips curve. Yeah. The philosophy that people having jobs causes inflation. It's not true. It's never been true. Yeah. It's been disproven in history.
And yet,
but no Fed chair has not believed it. They've all believed in Phillips curve.
And yet, EJ, you have Republicans that are singing. Not a lot, but a few Republicans that are singing that tune right now. I was talking about it with Senator Kennedy. And what they don't get is the importance of not raising the marginal rate, the marginal top rate. Because that's the rate that you get thrown into if you work a little harder. If you work a little harder, knowing that that extra work is going to lead to paying more taxes, you'll say the hell with it. And that's exactly why you don't raise the top marginal rate. Why Reagan brought it down to, what was it, 28% was his high point.
Right. And this is where they're just so ignorant of history, not just economic theory, but also economic history. Every time in the last 100 years where we've raised that top marginal tax rate, we did not get the increase in revenue we were expecting. Growth became lackluster, so we got less growth than we were expecting. And the share of total tax receipts paid by that top income bracket actually went down.
It's not just a phrase. It's something that we've learned from experience, that these things, the supply side economics, works. It does work, and people just need to focus on the facts. David, EJ, have a wonderful, wonderful Easter weekend. Good to see you.
You too. Thank you
for being here.